Now we're into the second half of the 2010s, and I would say where I started to kind of getting into what would become known as my Oscar movie marathon, where I would watch not just all the Best Picture nominees, but also the other non-Best Picture nominees in the top 8 categories, all the animated, international, and documentary nominees, and at least one or two, or rarely three, and extremely rare four movies that were just in the technical categories that could have just gotten Best Picture depending on how many technical nominations it got. But that wouldn't fully got into the format, I would say, until 2019. So we are going to start this up with 2015, and we begin up with The Big Short by Adam McKay. I am putting this one in. I'm going to put this in D. Like the concept of the financial crisis, obviously from 2007 and 8, with the whole buildup that would be occurred, is very interesting. But I think because being more of a dramatic comedy, I would say, just doesn't really work for me. There's not really a lot of scenes that I don't really remember, and there's like multiple characters you follow, not just obviously Steve Carell and Ryan Gosling's character, but I believe you have two Asian workers, I believe, that are also have a massive storyline, and then you have Michael Blurry's character, which is of course Christian Bale, who is a real life person with Asperger's. I don't really see a lot of autistic portrayal in the movie. I don't really see that. Maybe they could have just gotten an actual person with Asperger's to do the role instead of having somebody who doesn't have any autism, I would say. But it's been a while since I've seen the movie. The only thing I remember the most about the film was just some of the real life celebrities coming in. I know Margot Robbie obviously was one of them in a bathtub. There was Selena Gomez and I believe a famous doctor. I forget who the second one was after that. Like I know Selena Gomez and the doctor were doing like some sort of gambling and they were just explaining definitions, playing themselves just explaining what was going on. It's just that's odd comedy, but like this was the first time Adam McKay really actually went a massive transition. He went from like to making some of like a lot of one of the some of the worst comedies made. I know Step Brothers and Anchorman 2 he made, but now he made a massive transition with this, Vice, and Don't Look Up. I would not have given The Big Short the best adapted screenplay win. I would have given that to one of our other nominees in the picture nominees that was in that category. So yeah, I would have not nominated for this movie for anything. Next up is Steven Spielberg's Cold War biopic, Bridge of Spies. I'm gonna put this one in C. This like I kind of did enjoy the movie, but it just like it's not really very memorable. I would say the story is pretty good, the script is pretty good, and obviously, without a doubt, the thing that is so memorable about this movie is obviously the performance by Mark Rylance as the real life Rudolph. I believe that was his first name. I think Isabel. I know his last name. I think started with an A. I knew that, and obviously Rylance did one supporting actor. And a bit of a hot take on this. I know many people would prefer Sylvester Stallone to should have won for Creed, but I honestly agree with the Academy. I think Mark Rylance did deserve the win. His performance was very fantastic. The like how he's the Rudolph has portrayed the movie. It made the character very memorable. Like a lot of his scenes. I know "Will it help" is obviously a famous line that many people had told him when they came to talk to him about the movie, and obviously he mentioned that in his acceptance speech. Like his speech was pretty cool and almost felt like almost like a poem, I would say, but not really. But that was a very fantastic speech he gave. Probably one of the more memorable ones, I would say. It is very interesting. The script was actually written by the Coen brothers with Matt Charman. So, yeah, so a couple of times some filmmakers have worked on other movies, but just either writing or just producing the film, and that's the case with the Coen brothers. I keep forgetting I might have liked this movie, but it's since it's kind of usually forgetful for me, that's why I kind of put it in the C tier for some reason. Now we are into Brooklyn, which a lot of people don't usually talk about a lot, but I was blown away by this movie when I saw this for the first time, and I'm gonna put this in S. I really love Brooklyn. I love this whole story. Obviously, it was based on a novel, but the way how Nick Hornby wrote the script and John Crowley directed the film, of telling the story about obviously how this Irish immigrant was getting, obviously, of course, immigrating to Brooklyn, obviously to work there, and not also the feeling of her being a true American immigrant, but also with the relationship status she has and how she really enjoys more of her time in the U.S., especially in Brooklyn, more so than in her home in Ireland, even though it has some massive struggling difficulties with her sister and especially with her mother, especially when we get to the third act. But like Ailish's character journey is just so fantastic that she does feel like she's like no longer like um a daughter, as she feel like she's more like officially have grown up. This is like probably one of the more better overlooked, I would say, coming of age movies, even though it's like not really that much, because this is, I believe, like post like high school or college graduation, because this is like more of a young adult story, like around their 20s or so. But the way how Ailish just really captivate the movie, of all the pros and cons that she has to deal with not just obviously with her massive pros of her being in Brooklyn, but also the cons, of course, with her home state in Ireland. Not home state, home country in Ireland, excuse me. But yeah, but the biggest thing that really captivate the movie is, without a doubt, Saoirse Ronan's performance as Ailish. She gave a phenomenal performance. Maybe I would say, okay, between that and somebody else, two of the best performances of 2015. And this movie, I would say, this was, I think, the movie that I ended up having a bit of a crush on Saoirse Ronan. Um, she really almost makes me want to fall in love with Ailish or some of her other characters, with the exception of maybe one. But obviously with this film and another movie, Picture Nominee, that is on this decade, one of the two of the three of them. Yeah, it's so interesting that she, and honestly, she would have been my personal pick for Best Actress. I just also love her Irish, her just her accent in general. Even I know she's kind of an Irish America. She was born in America, I believe, but obviously her family is more, obviously her parents are Irish, so that's why she's kind of an Irish American. But yeah, she would have been my personal vote for Best Actress. I really loved the green dress she wore to the Oscars. Probably, maybe her best dress, maybe at the Oscars. And speaking of green, I absolutely love the green bathing suit that Ailish wears. I mean, that like the costume design is so iconic in that movie. I'm surprised that got overlooked for Best Costume Design. I love Nick Hornby's script. Julie Walters is pretty great in her small appearance. Emery Cohen, who plays the Italian American that obviously falls in love with Ailish, also very good as well. Like and obviously I do love that her Oscar clip of her about finally confessing to Emery's character that how the way how they said I love you, and just, or you love me, and just like that was her Oscar clip, and I love that scene so much. And just the connection that these two have and throughout their times is just fantastic. It's just the only con is obviously around the third act, when she has to go back to Ireland, um, specifically for her mother. Um, but I can't really go into why she had to go back, but also with the connection with the other Irish people, she doesn't feel like she doesn't really want to be in her own country anymore. But it is definitely one of the better coming of age movies, and I would say one of the more underrated romance movies. I would say, even though it's not really the main plot of the movie, but definitely one of the better subplot movies for romance for a movie like this. And here we come with the big dominant one, Mad Max Fury Road. Now, first up, I will mention I have never watched the original Mad Max trilogy. I still haven't till this day. So Fury Road, a lot of, because I kind of almost asked somebody when I was gonna get into Fury Road, I asked the question. Same thing with Star Wars: The Force Awakens. So I have to watch the original trilogy in order to understand, obviously, films like Fury Road and The Force Awakens. But they kind of almost state it's kind of like a standalone sequel, because it basically tells you like the world of Mad Max and even The Force Awakens of the world of Star Wars, even without the original trilogy, which obviously both movies worked well for me with even having not seen the original Mad Max or Star Wars trilogy. But when I saw Mad Max Fury Road for the first time, holy shit, what an epic. I am putting this in S tier. It's not double S tier, but that's how you do an action movie. I mean, that is obviously one of the best action movie. I think probably the best action movie I've seen. And like still, even though I know there's a lot of other films, like I have seen like other films like The Dark Knight and Die Hard, and but I've yet to see films like Raiders of the Lost Ark or The Matrix. So, but yeah, definitely an all-timer action movie. Like that's how you legit do an action movie. Like every scene is just so well directed from George Miller and so well edited from Margaret Siskel. The sound design, I mean, the way how the camera moves from the cinematography is just so fantastic. I mean, this movie dominated the tech categories of the Oscars that year, winning obviously the sounds, production design, the cars alone almost just feels like merchandising for it. But honestly, I don't think there's not really any massive product for those cars. Ironically enough. Costume design, makeup and hairstyling, and film editing, which Margaret Siskel, of course, is George Miller's wife, by the way. The visual effects are fantastic and one of the best visual lineups, although it is very amazing that Ex Machina won that Oscar, but my personal pick probably would have been Star Wars The Force Awakens. Mad Max would have also been my pick for cinematography, honestly. I don't think The Revenant did not need to take that. We'll get to that in about a few minutes. George Miller easily should have won Best Director. I'm glad he did got a directing win, even though it was at Critics' Choice. But I'm glad at least he got at least one Best Director win in the main televised industry movie award season. But yeah, this movie, obviously, if I would say it might have would still have Macon in a span of five nominees for Best Picture. Obviously, I know it would not make sense, especially since Weinstein was still in the dominant, but as we saw, they didn't really took to Weinstein that much this year with The Hateful Eight or Carol in terms of not getting in for Best Picture. So I would still say in the span of five, because based on all the wins it got, I think Mad Max might have would have made it in, especially with George Miller getting the director nomination if there were the five. But yeah, and obviously now showing with how this, along with the Grand Budapest Hotel and another movie we'll get into in 2017, especially for a movie that comes out at the very beginning of the year, since I believe this movie came out in May or late April or something like that. But it just shows that even there, some of the best movies of the year do come in the first half of the year, and sometimes they're overlooked. And I was kind of amazed that it ended up becoming a top awards film, despite of it obviously being released, of course, in the spring, and everyone seemed to loved it. And that's when it was like really considered the top awards, like Best Picture and Director. And yeah, it would have been my pick for Best Picture, Director. I'm still happy it won a lot of Oscars though, but it is one of the best action movies out there, without a doubt. Furiosa, I would say, was fine. I guess it was okay. So I still have yet to see the original trilogy though. Now we're into The Martian from Ridley Scott, his latest Best Picture nominated film, and what many people consider to be his best film in a long time, either since Gladiator or Black Hawk Down or Thelma and Louise. I am putting this one in A. I almost put it in S. The only reason why I went to A is because some of the supporting characters are not really that memorable. I don't know if it's just the bland casting of like Jessica Chastain or Jeff Daniels or stuff like that. Like second year in a row, Jessica Chastain in a sci-fi space movie. First Interstellar from Christopher Nolan, and now The Martian. Um, but what I really loved about the movie is obviously with not just the way how it's obviously focusedly specifically on just one character with Mark Watney, with obviously from the fantastic performance by Matt Damon. And he would have been my personal pick for Best Actor. Yeah, Matt Damon would have been my pick. I know Jimmy Kimmel would not like that, but that would have been funny if he did won an Oscar night over Leonardo DiCaprio and came in Ben Affleck's tux and just has his Oscar on his hand, and just like Kimmel would just still kick him out, even though, and just call him a loser still. And obviously he's still great. The 2 years he hosted, he Obviously, the year after he hosted, and obviously the year later he would produce Manchester by the Sea, and the first time when Kimmel hosted the ceremony, and he was happy he lost. But yeah, Damon would have been my pick for Best Actor easily for The Martian. I can't really say if it's his best acting nomination because although I've seen Invictus, I've yet to see Good Will Hunting, so I can't really say, but yeah, he is fantastic in this performance. This would have been my pick for Best Adapted Screenplay, especially if this is written by Drew Goddard, who directed The Cabin in the Woods. So, yeah, Goddard really nailed the script here of adapting the novel here. And all the scientific definitions on how to try to survive on Mars, especially like growing a potato farm in the main base, their Mars base that Mark ended up have to be living here, even though he's almost sick of disco music. That's one line I remembered. But the potato farm creativity he did is just fantastic of the way how he did it, and like that's definitely something. I think maybe this might have been my pick for best production design over Mad Max, but then again, the cars in Mad Max are also fantastic. It's between either or. I can't really say, but in the technical categories. But yeah, The Martian, definitely a fantastic movie. I'm sad that this movie walked away home empty-handed, but it definitely would have been my picks for adapted screenplay and best actor for Matt Damon. I think that I think that meme was going around the time when this movie came out. By the way, now into what would have been almost, I would say, almost the closest, or I believe almost the closest time to have a person have back-to-back movies winning Best Picture. I'm not mistaken, almost because Alejandro González Iñárritu became the third filmmaker, I believe I stated this in the last episode, to win directing twice in a row with The Revenant. So, and obviously the movie that got Leonardo DiCaprio his Oscar, and Emmanuel Binsky won cinematography 3 years in a row, and I'm putting this in E. It is just an absolute boredom of a movie. I just couldn't really get into this movie a lot, especially with the runtime it had. It's very interesting that this was almost kind of like another one take style, although there were some editing in this one compared to Birdman. So it just the long takes just didn't really work for me on this movie. And DiCaprio's performance, no, that should have not been his Oscar win. Although I've yet to see What's Eating Gilbert Grape, which is his only nomination post pre 2000s I've yet to see. Even though I know many people would say Titanic, but he was not up for Titanic. But yeah, this is definitely not probably a consolation prize. I don't think it has aged well. I think his win is probably, if I'm not mistaken, the most viewed video on the Oscars YouTube channel, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it is. It is the most popular video on the Oscars YouTube channel with a total of 57 million views. And I just don't understand that, like, win specifically. Like I said, Matt Damon would have been my personal pick. Tom Hardy, I don't remember anything. Obviously, he had a better performance in Mad Max Fury Road, obviously. So, yeah, he had a year as well. So, and he also had Legend. So, like, Tom Hardy had three big, massive movies. And then, of course, he became a joke in Venom. So, yeah, unfortunately for that. Yeah, I just, like, it took forever for me to finish this movie, and it just, like, not even the one takes, not even the climax didn't do anything for me. Yeah, I just really don't think Inarritu did not need to win twice. Mad Max would have been my pick in cinematography and director, so yeah, I don't think this movie did not really needed to do any. Like, I don't think this movie. Yeah, I don't think this movie needed to get the both nominations, honestly, and it did not need to win like another win for Lubeski or Inarritu. Now we're into Room, and obviously it's not The Room, the Tommy Wiseau film. Obviously, this is the 2015 film from Lenny Abramson that was filmed in Canada. So it's very interesting. I want to mention I'm glad this movie was not up for Best British Film, even though it's directed by an Irish guy and it was based on a novel by an Irish woman. But the movie, I believe it's supposed to set in America, but it is filmed in Canada. So one of the few Canadian movies that is noteworthy. And I'm going to put this one in A, almost close to S. It's just that there are some scenes, like in the beginning when they're stuck in rooms specifically, but the whole suspense really does go into it, especially when Jacob Tremblay's character, and Ma, which is Brie Larson's character, finally manage to leave, and then Jack finally gets to see his grandparents for the first time, especially his grandmother, and just trying to figure out the exploration of room and also how he not also his how he is going to be dealing with the situations he has to deal with for his life outside the room for the first time, but also with his mother, with all the situations she has been going through after when she got released, because obviously this obviously has a massive subject matter, and obviously this was very noteworthy to note is that if you have seen the Oscar telecast, after when Lady Gaga's performance of "Till It Happens to You" from the documentary "The Hunting Ground" won, she was hugging a lot of college abuse survivors, and obviously because Brie Larson had very felt personal closely to this move to Room specifically, and obviously you can understand why she was pissed of giving the Oscar to Casey Affleck the following year for Best Actor, and she really hated doing that. Um, and I think she really wished it would have been Denzel Washington for her. Speaking of Brie Larson, I want to talk about her performance here. Honestly, I'm going to be a bit of a hot take on this one. I think she is supporting on this movie because Jacob Tremblay is the clear lead in this movie because the whole perspective of the movie is coming from Jack and not much of his mother. It does feel like there are kind of a co-leads when they're in the room, but most of the time is coming through Jack's perspective, like in his closet, or specifically when he's in the hospital and when they're in his grandmother's house. We are seeing through his eyes and not much of his mother's eyes. And I think that is kind of bizarre for me that she swept the Best Actress race that year when I think it should have been for supporting. If she would have been up for supporting and Jacob Tremblay went lead, Larson I still think would have swept Best Supporting Actress. But I would have preferred Joan Allen out of all the supporting cast members, honestly. And I know Jacob Tremblay went supporting at SAG, but the only reason why he went supporting, not because of category fraud, but number one, he was obviously new to the industry, and two, that was much of a big of a kind of a bit of a packed Best Actor race, especially that was the DiCaprio year. So even if he was nominated, he was not going to beat DiCaprio. But Jacob Tremblay would have been my winner for Best Actor in general. One of the best child performances in the movies of the 21st century. Definitely one of the best. Yeah, he would have been easily my best pick for Best Actor. And it's so odd. The Oscars love to nominate a lot of child actors, but a lot of them are girls. No offense, but it's odd they rarely recognize male child performers. And the only one they have done so that is most notably is Justin Henry in Kramer versus Kramer. I mean, Tremblay didn't get in for Room, and when we get into the next years of the first half of the 2020s, Mila McCarter-Gardner was overlooked for Anatomy of a Fall. So yeah, a lot of male child performance always gets overlooked at the awards, and it's always the girls that usually get it. No, like I said, this is not a sexist or feminist comment. It's just that if you look at the actual awards track record from the Oscars, it does show. Yeah, so Tremblay, yeah, so it would be very interesting that my personal winners, two personal winners in the leading categories of the 2010s, would be Convention Wallace in Beast of the Southern Wild and Jacob Tremblay in Room. So yeah, and I was really happy Lenny Abraham got the Best Director nomination, and oddly enough, I was actually predicting him back in December. I was still kind of doing nomination predictions before I did it on video. I was thinking I was doing this on Twitter or something like that, or social media. And I was predicting Abraham to get this out of nowhere director nomination because Room was doing well when we got to the Golden Globes and Critics' Choice and SAG, especially when Jacob Tremblay got the SAG nomination. And I was thinking, okay, since I was predicting now Larson for actress, Tremblay for supporting actor, Joan Allen for supporting actress, the script, and Best Picture, I was like, okay, I'll put this in film editing and put this in director since I was thinking, okay, this might be a top 3 movie. But then it weirdly missed at PGA, and then I took Abramson out, I took Tremblay out, I took Joan Allen out, and the editing out, and then I just said, okay, picture, actress, and screenplay, that's it. And then Abramson got the director nomination, and I was so upset about that. I'm not the only one that had that idea, I believe. Somebody else I also saw had this as well, but that kind of sucked. But it would have been amazing for me to keep that prediction, but it's just that that PGA snub was very odd. And we wrap up 2015 with Spotlight, our Best Picture winner from Tom McCarthy, which only won the first award of the night of the ceremony, Original Screenplay, and the last award of the night for Best Picture. So one of the shortest Best Picture winning counts ever. Obviously, those that just won one Oscar, I believe, like Grand Hotel, for an example, that obviously can't be impossible because nowadays to try to win picture and nothing else. It almost happened with the trial of the Chicago 7, but we'll get to that in the next part. Okay, so when it comes to Spotlight, now, when I saw this movie back in 2016, I was honestly very bored with this movie. Honestly. And nowadays, I don't know where to go with it because I am a Catholic person. And I do nowadays understand more of the sexual abuse that has occurred since I have now matured more so, since I'm now in my 20s. But I'm not sure how the movie portrayed the media, specifically the Boston Globe here. I know they really went into a lot of details, but it just like I really almost like I would almost like to see like a villainous side of the Catholic Church with Cardinal Bernard Law's side. But obviously, this was primarily focused on the Boston Globe of the spotlight team of the Boston Globe specifically. Excuse me. Um, so I don't know if I would feel offended or not, and I don't think I would be because obviously the news media does have the right. But I just think like maybe I just think the boredom of me kind of just really felt to me. And since I think it just didn't work well pacing wise and acting wise, I might have to put this in E. So, yeah, it would have not been my pick for Best Picture or Original Screenplay. Obviously, Mad Max would be my pick for Best Picture. My original screenplay pick would have been Straight Outta Compton, by all means. So, yeah. But it was a very intense moment between that, The Revenant, and The Big Short for the Best Picture win, because The Big Short won the Producers Guild, The Revenant won the Directors Guild, and Spotlight won the SAG Ensemble Award, with The Big Short and Spotlight winning both WGA awards for adapted and original, and The Revenant got the Best Actor win for Leonardo DiCaprio. So all three movies had two major guild wins, and Spotlight got the SAG Ensemble support, and it got the win. So yeah, and it's interesting that he had 2 years in a row with Michael Keaton being in a Best Picture winning movie, so that was also very noteworthy. Yeah, and this movie got Rachel McAdams her first nomination of her career. Mark Ruffalo, I think might have been the standout of the cast, especially his, obviously his infamous scene where he said it could have been any of us, which obviously that was his Oscar clip, but it's just like it's not really that very memorable. And it's also worth noting that for those Macy's Parade watchers, Brian Darcy James, who you might have seen in Broadway musical performances like in Titanic and Something Rotten that year, the year when Spotlight came out. He was on Broadway at the time as well. He was in this movie as one of the journalists, although it was a very small role. But he was one of the played the journalist who knew where the one of the priests was in his neighborhood. So that is very interesting. But yeah, since this movie is kind of boring to me, I have to put this in E. So after 2 years, we had eight. We now go back to nine for at least another 2 years with 2016, the a very infamous year specifically because of what happened at the Oscars. But I'll talk about that once we get into the very end. So. Of 2016. So we begin this up obviously with Arrival from Denis Villeneuve, which obviously got a couple of nominations, one for sound editing, got Villeneuve's first nomination for director, and his only one, by the way, since he was not up for both Dune movies. But this was very infamous that Amy Adams got snubbed for Best Actress. For the movie itself, I am gonna put this in S tier. I mean, I really was surprised by this movie, like specifically because of the writing by Eric Heiserer and Denis Villeneuve's direction of telling this unique story of this supposed alien invasion, having this university professor who knows specifically a well to communicate with specifically the languages that the aliens are doing with these signs and how they're what they want specifically, and her to try to make sure that the world is safe and stuff like that with her fellow co-worker, specifically who is Germany Renner, and just seeing how this alien story is with some sort of story that is kind of going personal with something and dealing with a bit of the loss of supposedly of her daughter or something like that. But I can't really go much into detail because it would be spoiler territory. But yeah, um, the whole unique area, specifically in the ship, is very creative. The sound is fantastic on the aliens, like that. Like that, then it's almost like that's a sound that you heard it might have in the Oscars, and you can tell why it won for best sound editing just because of this alien sounds alone, and that was fantastic. I can see why it did not get in for visual effects because it's not really a big visual wise movie, so I can see why. But it is very odd it didn't make it though. Now let's talk about Amy Adams' performance here for me because I might have said this before in I think in one of the Blu-ray videos and a couple of award show predictions. Honestly, I actually kind of agree with the Academy on this one because I'll be honest, out of all the things in Arrival, I think Adams' performance is the weakest thing of the entire movie because I think Adams gave a very um emotionless performance. Like she has no emotion to her character. She's just kind of like, okay, I'm just here. That's what I'm doing, and I have no emotions, and that's what I'm doing. Like, I mean, Germany Renner gives, I would say, the MVP of the performance, and I'm surprised he was overlooked for Best Supporting Actor. I mean, he was fantastic in all of his scenes. I mean, he was up 2 years for the Hurt Locker in the Town, back-to-back years. So it would have been make sense to give him like a nomination outside of the MCU, of course. So obviously, if you wanted, because he was obviously Hawkeye around this time, but if you want to give him a fantastic performance that is not during his time in the MCU, it easily would have been Arrival. So yeah, Adams, I honestly, I can understand why she missed because I can see some actors thinking she's not really doing anything. Same thing with Nocturnal Animals as well. She just also, I actually do prefer her in Nocturnal Animals, honestly, but not by much, honestly. I mean, it's not really that emotionalist, but it does have more of a connection with specifically of her ex-lover's character in Arrival with in Nocturnal Animals, excuse me, with Jake Gyllenhaal's character. But in this movie, it's just like she just is just there. That's the reason why, and I kind of do agree with the Academy. I don't think she would have been in my personal lineup in general, although it would be up for director, supporting actor, adapted screenplay, and best picture, but best actress she would not. Next up is Fences, Denzel Washington's adaptation of the August Wilson play, and kind of almost somewhat based specifically on the 2010 Broadway stage revival that starred him and Viola Davis, both of which won Tonys for, and obviously the movie that got Viola Davis her Best Supporting Actress win. I know some people think she's leading, but I do agree, yeah, she is supporting. I am putting this one in B. I do really like the whole setting, that specifically the connection of this Troy character and all the relationships he has with his wife and his son, and basically around this house that kind of is a centering focus on him. And Denzel as Troy here gives one of the two best performances of 2016. Like, obviously, the I don't like you scene obviously kind of explains everything, but it's just like his other scenes is like how his personality is like so like angry and just almost like has a massive ego that he doesn't care about his wife, he doesn't care about his son, and it's just like, if you screw with me, I will try to ruin your life. And it's almost like the strikes 1, 2, and 3 he gave to his kids specifically, and he just really he takes it all, and have his son to unfortunately almost like have him not no longer be part of the football team or not do anything because he has to fall under his command or something like that. And the way, obviously, since this movie is accurately August Wilson's entire dialogue script, since it's just nothing has changed in the movie in general, it's just that Eric Roth, I believe, no, it was Tony Kushner, excuse me, I believe was the one who just did the setting for the script, but he didn't receive any credits. It's just because obviously the whole screenplay was by August Wilson himself, even though he's been gone for several years, but it just kept in like that. So Yeah, Fences, obviously fantastic. Viola Davis gives a fantastic performance. Definitely my pick, easily for Best Supporting Actress. Best Actor, he would be on the edge at number two, but not by much. But I'm glad he did got a win this season at SAG, and I think Brie Larson probably think that was probably the best win in the Best Actor category that season, because all the other wins went to another performance in one of our other picture nominees that we'll get into. Next up is Hacksaw Ridge, Mel Gibson's World War II film. The first time the Academy really recognized Mel Gibson, respectively, after his whole controversies, even though they did recognize a bit of the Passion of the Christ and Apocalypto. But this was kind of almost a master triumphant for him, even though nothing really happened after which. I am putting this one in. I'm going to put this in C. The only reason I almost put it in D because the writing and not really the performances don't really stand out, and the whole setup of Desmond Doss's character of just why he doesn't want to fight, and even though he enters into the military because he wants to just be this medic for the military and just save so many lives, and that's what he does, and the relationship with his parents is just nothing really, or his siblings, nothing really goes on in the relationship he has. Just there's just nothing. But the war scenes are obviously the one thing that really keeps you into this movie, and I think that's the reason why. It did win Best Sound Mixing, which finally gave Kevin O'Connell a long overdue sound Oscar win he got, and he really meant definitely one of the best memorable speeches I would think of the night, because it's just like he was so happy that he got the win for that, and even Hacksaw Ridge took film editing as well. I wouldn't personally put it in any of my personal lineups. I also have not seen the documentary of the movie that this. I also have not seen the documentary that this movie was based on. So similar to the Eyes of Tammy Faye documentary as well. Um, I might have to see that sometime soon. And see if I prefer that over Hacksaw Ridge in general. So yeah, and interesting, got a BAFTA nomination for its screenplay, which made no sense. Yeah, and Garfield obviously did had a year with that and Martin Scorsese's Silence, but I wasn't big on neither of the two films, so. But I do prefer Hacksaw Ridge over Silence any day. Now we're into Hell or High Water, which was released sometime in the summer, but really didn't got bigger until around the fall season. From David Mackenzie, and I'm gonna put this one in D. Um, the problem with this movie is just I do like the story, the whole bank heist idea with these two brothers, and obviously this cop who is, or the sheriff in general, doing his final big mission before his retirement of trying to capture these brothers, and it just it seemed a great concept, but I think some of the casting choices is just what keeps it off, and maybe Taylor Sheridan's writing here. Jeff Bridges probably would have been not been my personal pick. Chris Pine just doesn't do anything, but Ben Foster is without a doubt the best thing about the movie. He even won the Film Independent Spirit Award at that ceremony when they didn't even recognize Jeff Bridges, though. So I'm very happy that he got something, because he was definitely the best thing about the movie. Probably my favorite scene of the movie. I know it's a very odd one, but it's just when they're in this casino and Pines' character is just sitting in a bar having this beer, and while his brother's doing the gambling, this woman comes up to him and just see if specifically to want to hook up with him, and then just Foster's character comes in and just says, "What are you doing with my little brother?" and just tells her to get out of here. Even though I think that would have been a lot more interesting, but obviously this movie was about the brothers and not really try to force a romance story into the movie, of course, even though they were in a place where you could almost get a hooker or something like that. Now into Hidden Figures, and this is actually another one of my mom's personal favorites. The biopic of three of the most notable African American ladies that worked during NASA, during the Civil Rights Movement and before the Apollo mission, stuff like that. I believe Dorothy is one of the names, I believe. I forget. But I am putting this one in. I'm going to put this. I'm going to put this in C. It is fine. I kind of think I liked it a little bit better than the first time I watched it the first time, because There are some memorable scenes, more so. Obviously, the no bathroom scene, of course, the no colored bathroom specifically, because it is very interesting to have the story of both, um, with obviously the NASA program and the civil rights movement, in together in this one massive story, which is definitely something that's kind of very overlooked in the civil rights movement, and just seeing this whole concept, and obviously primarily focusing, of course, on the space aspect and the math skills that Taraji B. Henson's character does, throughout the movie. It's just like she's like one of the more smarter, people in the program, and just like she gets this massive promotion to work at this people with all these, all these white people, I would say, led by Kevin Costner's character, and then she really has a standout. And then with all the situations that have to go with something with the whole segregation, and just like, okay, and like Costner's character is just like, after when, Tension does her entire monologue scene, it's just like, it doesn't matter anymore what skin we have, we all have to work together. And obviously that's the case, is obviously with how each of the three ladies have, with obviously with Henson's character, Janelle Monáe's character, and Octavia Spencer's character. And it's interesting that both Janelle Monáe and Mahershala Ali are both in this and Moonlight as well. Obviously playing two completely different characters. Honestly, I prefer Mahershala Ali in this movie more so than Moonlight, honestly. I'll be honest. Even though he doesn't appear much in this movie, but the way how he just plays this soldier who falls in love with our main character, it's just like one of the best small performances, and I really do like that little, romance subplot, I would say. I have seen my mom play this movie a couple of times, and I know she really loves this movie, so I know she would have put this probably at maybe like IA or S or something like that. Here it is, one of our most nominated films in the Oscars history, with All About Eve and Titanic, Damien Chazelle's big Hollywood musical, La La Land. I don't think this needs explanation where this is going. Double S tier easily. I mean, how can I was just blown away by this movie when immediately the first musical number started with Another Day of Sun. It just like went like that. It just like blew me away through it. Even though there's not much of a script going on, and it would not make it my original screenplay lineup, but Chazelle's direction and the performances by Ryan Gosling and Emily Stone, yes, I am calling her by her real name, because she wants her fans to do that. It just like an amazing experience. A lot of the musical numbers, a lot of them do work, although some of them might not work well in context or out of context, depending on your views of the movie. Although the soundtrack is not something I usually go back to. Obviously, Another Day of Sun is my personal favorite, and then like Someone in the Crowd, Gosling and Stone's first number they do together in the streets or something like that, and John Legend's number is fantastic. City of Stars and Audition are great in context with the movie, by the way, and somewhat in their own as well. It's just like the whole experience, and the ending is fantastic as well, kind of with Whiplash. And I was just like, okay, how can our picture winner top that off? Because this was the second to last one I saw with the picture nominees, because I was going in a specific order, because I saw the picture winner last, and it was like, oh my gosh, it was just so amazing. It got 6 wins, of course. Emily Stone definitely deserved the win for Best Actress. Damien Chazelle deserved the win for Best Director, and yes, it would have been my pick for Best Picture. Now we're into Lion, the final film to receive a Best Picture nomination under Harvey Weinstein's name, and I believe the last ever, movie involving with Harvey Weinstein to ever be nominated at the Oscars, I believe. I don't think none other Weinstein Company movie was nominated that year's Oscars. I'm not sure in the technical category. It's definitely not in the top 8, but this was definitely the very last one before months later the Me Too movement and his allegations would come up. I'm going to put this one in D. The thing about it is, I only really liked the portion when we get to Saru as an adult. When Saru is a child, it's nothing to do with the child actor specifically, but it's just that there's really nothing going on throughout the first portion of the movie when Saru is as a child, because it's just like, okay, he's doing something with his brother, and then he gets lost, and then just has this entire walking alone experience, and then he just gets adopted in Australia. It's just like, there's nothing really going on throughout the movie. It's just a lot of scenery images, and that's kind of basically it. There's really nothing. But then when we get into the second portion of the movie, when he's now an adult, which is now, of course, played by Dev Patel, when he's in Australia, and now with the situation he's at, and obviously kind of figuring out the relationship with his adopted parents and his adopted stepbrother, and the relationship he had with Rooney Mara's character, um, and just trying to figure out how to get back home through Google Earth by all means. And obviously, this was a real story, of course. It just like I think that second portion works a little bit better. And Rooney Mara is fantastic in this, and I think she would have been my supporting actress choice for Lion over Nicole Kidman, because I think Kidman just only has like that one scene she has explaining why she had adopted Saru and his stepbrother as well, instead of having actual children, and that's basically the only thing I can remember for it. Just like there's just really nothing going on with this movie other than the whole little romance plot with Saru and Mara's character, but it's just Mara's performance with Dev Patel's performance just works well, and Patel is actually pretty good in the movie. It's just that I don't think this was not really necessary to be in the Oscar stages. It's just Weinstein was doing his thing before months later he would get exposed, because if he would have gotten exposed in 2016, then this movie would have not been up for Best Picture. Now into probably one of the more heavier Best Picture movies, Manchester by the Sea from Kenneth Lonergan, which did win Best Actor for Casey Affleck and Original Screenplay, and produced by Matt Damon. Ironically, I think this Matt Damon was supposed to make his, I believe, his directorial debut with this movie, with Lonergan just writing the script, but then things kind of got not really complicated, but I think Damon lent Lonergan the director's chair probably because I think the script or something like that, or just since Lonergan has more experience with directing movies, and since he kind of know how to build more of the characters, I think Damon gave Lonergan the job instead, with Damon just producing the film. I am putting this one in A. Oh my, it is a very depressing movie, a very heavy one, but you understand where Lee Chandler is coming from, because with the whole why he has a massive almost like very depressed all the time, especially when he's back in Manchester. It's just like he really does not want to be there, because everyone knows something that happened in the past with him and his ex-wife, which I can't really go into because it's spoiler territory. Because the only reason why he's back is because obviously his brother had passed away, and he just found out that through his will that his son, who is of course Lucas Hedges' character, like now like Lee has to be his full guardian, and he's just like, because he doesn't want to be in Manchester, he wants to be back in Boston or somewhere else because of all the past events that haunts him to this day, and just makes him very depressed. Even with his ex-wife Randy around, he just doesn't want to be around with anyone. It's just like he just like I can't, like I said, I can't go into spoiler territory, but that just really works well, not just with Lonergan's writing, but with Casey Affleck's fantastic performance, who definitely would have been is definitely my deserving pick for Best Actor. Despite the controversy he has in the past, I do think he deserved the win for Best Actor, and he was the other best performance of 2016. Both him and Denzel are both fantastic. I could almost consider doing a tie for Best Actor, but I think since I like Manchester by the Sea a lot more than Fences, I had to give it to Casey Affleck's my personal pick, and definitely a good win. Original was definitely a great win, although my personal pick would have been 20th Century Women, but Manchester is definitely a close second. I'm glad Lucas Hedges got in for Best Supporting Actor. That was a great nomination. Michelle Williams is fine. I just think like her present scenes are just fine, but just any of the backstory scenes was not really that necessary. I just think this is a small performance. I don't think that really did not need to. It's very odd that she was in a lot of heavy promotional material, like in the poster, when it should have been like Casey Affleck and Lucas Hedges in the poster, and not like Casey Affleck and Michelle Williams. Because a lot of people would think, oh, it's about the relationship, but no, it's about this connection with this uncle and nephew situation going on after his nephew just lost his dad. And obviously the whole situation that both of them are having, especially with both tragedies occurring, with not just with Lucas's Hedges character losing his dad already, but with Lee dealing with the situation in the past that he can't really handle with anymore. And one of the very heaviest movies, and obviously this was one of the, I believe, Amazon's first movie to be in the consideration of the Oscars. And at least that and The Big Sick and I believe Cold War are so far the only notable Amazon Studios movies I can think of, and Sound of Metal, I believe, that have gotten released in theaters and actually got a physical media release. The latter two, Cold War and Sound of Metal, got Criterion releases, while Manchester by the Sea and The Big Sick got standard Blu-ray releases. So at least they know how to do that, although they have not done a lot in their recent films yet, like American Fiction, for an example. I know One Night in Miami they had just did, um, but with them, with Amazon now purchasing MGM, now being Amazon MGM Studios, it's just like how many of their films are now going to get a physical media release now. And now let's come into our Best Picture winning film, Moonlight, from Barry Jenkins, the first LGBTQ plus themed movie to win Best Picture and the first film to have a primarily black cast to win Best Picture. And obviously, this was infamous to win Best Picture over La La Land, not because it was a massive upset, but the whole incident that occurred. And I remembered I saw this live, and I was shocked that I never thought this would happen, that an envelope error of announcing the wrong winner would be on the top category itself, Best Picture. And I like this was not the only first time that the wrong envelope was handed. Like the first time it happened was I believe back in the 60s when the original score categories were split in two different categories, and Sammy Davis Jr. presented the award, and he got one of the score. He was obviously presenting both, and I think the first one was like an adaptation or treatment category. He was announcing the nominees and was accidentally given the original score category instead of the adaptation one. And then and obviously he just said they gave me the wrong envelope. And then like he made a funny joke and said, "Wait till the NAACP hears about this." that was a very funny moment. And then obviously, after he went on to the adapted score winner, he did the original score nominees, and then he just said, "Guess who the winner is?" And, like, that was no surprise, but that was like a category that was presented a bit earlier, in like he just announced the wrong award earlier than usual. But Best Picture was clearly the last incident, and obviously there was a lot of evidence. Now, I want to talk about, obviously, I did not see the Picture nominees until after the ceremony, because if I did, and obviously I stated La La Land is obviously my pick. If I did saw them before the Oscars, I would have been pissed off, and I know many people were pissed off about this. And for me, I was kind of even with Moonlight, and I'm gonna put this in C. I think obviously the real reason for me I think the real reason why I won is because it's the big middle finger to the hashtag Oscars so white controversy after when the past 2 years when no black actors were nominated for any of the acting categories. And because of how they had to really change the diversity the following year, and especially in this decade after the hashtag Oscar so male controversy, that's why you have like a lot more movies like Moonlight winning this, and even big female directed movies like Nomadland and The Power and Coda winning Best Picture, of course. So Moonlight obviously showed more true of black cinema in general, and especially LGBTQ plus themed movies in general. Kind of almost like this is for us also not giving in Brokeback Mountain Best Picture of 2005 almost, and I could even say that. Here's the thing about my thoughts on Moonlight. I'm not a fan of the first act. I only like the second half of Act 2, but I love Chapter 3. Yeah, Chapter 1 is just not really that interesting. It's just obviously just Chiron and his friends like little kid journey, and then obviously having a father figure with Juan, which is Mahershala Ali's character, which I don't understand the best supporting actor win on that. I can see why, because of the influence that he would have on Chiron, especially in Chapter 3, but it's just that I wouldn't give him the nomination for that. That would have not been my personal pick, honestly. He had a better performance in Green Book, and we'll get to that. Um, it just like second half of Act 2 wasn't really much, but Naomi Harris's performance was fantastic in all three of her acts. She appeared in all the chapters. I think Chapter 2 was probably my favorite scene from her specifically, and I think the scene they showed was her Oscar clip, and that was definitely her best scene in the entire movie, and I loved all of her scenes in Moonlight without a doubt. in all three of her chapters throughout the movie, especially her final scene. I even kind of talked about her final scene with Chiron, how I almost wanted something similar to what should have been in Boyhood with Mason and his mother, but a little bit differently. Um, yeah, chapter three is fantastic, and the way how Chiron's best friend just makes him a great meal when he visits him the first time they seen each other as adults. That's fantastic. The score, the cinematography are fantastic. That iconic score piece that you hear when Chiron's swimming with one that is used on the trailers, that's a fantastic piece from Nicholas Bertel. So yeah, I'm kind of half and half on the movie. It's okay. There are some good moments, but it's just like I would only go back. I would just start from the second half of chapter 2 through chapter 3, but I would watch all of Naomi Harris's scenes as Chiron's mother throughout the entirety of the movie. 2017 is obviously very notable for being, of course, the year of the hashtag #MeToo movement. So we begin this up with "Call Me by Your Name," which did one for Best Adapted Screenplay, written by James Ivory, who previously had directed films like A Room with a View, Howard's End, and The Remains of the Day. But this was, of course, directed by Luca Guadagnino. And the only time the Oscars would actually respect one of his movies, because they didn't really care about challengers this past season, or last year specifically. We'll see how they would do with After the Hunt. Um, this is easily going for me in E. I just, it's like, I don't know if it's just that the addition of the Italian language, but it's just like the, I honestly think the gay aspect just didn't work for me compared to like Moonlight and especially in Brokeback Mountain. I think because with the age gap between Timothy Chalamet and Armie Hammer's characters are just very odd to me. It's just like almost like a young teen meets a college student, and just like okay, not like a high school student meets a college student and just has this unique relationship, and it just like that's so odd to me. There's nothing really that stood out. It just like they just have some secret relationships they have, and then just like it just like there's really nothing going on with both Chalamet and Hammer's character. Michael Stuhlbarg's monologue is pretty good, I will admit. And he kind of knows the massive secret, but he does understand where his son is coming from. The best thing about the movie is easily the two Sufjan Stevens songs, Visions of Gideon and especially Mystery of Love. I'm glad Mystery of Love did got that Best Original Song nomination. Although James Ivory is a gay man himself, I would have not given this to Best Adapted Screenplay, and that was a pretty weak year, honestly, for adapted in competition in general. I would have given that to Aaron Sorkin for Molly's Game. Now into Darkest Hour, the movie that got Gary Oldman his Oscar, and almost could have worked as a double feature with Dunkirk, and we'll get to Dunkirk here as well. Um, I am putting this one in E as well. I don't remember a lot of the movie except for maybe Ullman's performance and just the makeup, and that's basically it. Maybe some of the cinematography shots, but it's just like it is interesting that this movie and Dunkirk do take place in the exact same times, but it's just there's nothing really going on with me throughout this movie. I just don't have a fond memory of it other just than Oldman in a lot of makeup and what the honest trailer called it Oldman in a fat suit, as what they said. I'm not joking. Yeah, maybe cinematography and maybe costume design, maybe production design, but it's very forgettable. And even though this is from Joe Wright, who had Atonement, but I go back to Atonement, but over Darkest Hour, but Pride and Prejudice is easily better than those two, and even I like I would even go back to Anna Karenina maybe over Darkest Hour, but definitely not over Atonement. Speaking of Dunkirk, let's go into Christopher Nolan's World War II epic, and this was actually my first Nolan film, by the way. And without a doubt, S tier. I mean, I was so blown away. Like this is almost like the perfect movie, I would say, other than Inception, but I think more so here with Dunkirk to understand Nolan's filmmaking style because obviously you have specifically three different sections of this battle in Dunkirk. You have the one in the beach, specifically that takes a couple of days. You've got, I think, 1 week, I believe. And then you got the one in the boat with Mark Rylance that takes 1 day, and then you got one guy in a plane that just takes 1 hour. And it works so well going back and forth with all three of these structure stories. And I think this is probably the best example of how to understand Nolan's filmmaking style. I would say more so than Memento, Inception, Interstellar, and even Tenet. I think this is the prime movie, and I would be even a hot take, Oppenheimer. I think this is the perfect movie that I think to start your time with Christopher Nolan. If you want to start with Christopher Nolan's movies, I'd say start with Dunkirk if you're not going by filmography order, so you can understand his filmmaking style. And I think this worked fantastically. The sound design is great. The editing is fantastic. We definitely deserve that win for film editing. Directing, Nolan would have been a very close second for me, but there is somebody I do think definitely did deserve that win. Very happy it got in for picture. Obviously, this was Nolan's first nomination for directing. I think this is actually my favorite war Best Picture nominated movie. Out of all the films that involving with war in general, this is definitely my favorite one in specifically. This is definitely my favorite war movie of the 21st century that has got an Oscar nomination for Best Picture. Now into our second horror film of the century to receive a Best Picture nomination, and like The Grand Budapest Hotel and Mad Max Fury Road, a movie that came out at the very beginning of the year, I believe I believe it was in February, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, but it was a box office hit and was like the most talked about movies of the year. Jordan Peele's directorial debut feature, Get Out. For a while back then, I would have given this a B, but now I'm gonna give it more of a C because let's start up with the best thing about this movie, and easily one of the most memorable things is easily Daniel Kaluuya's performance here. He would have been my personal pick for Best Actor over Gary Oldman. I mean, like, since you go through his journey as the main character, his experience is just like the real, like, almost like a unique horror side to this white family that he's with. Well, obviously with his main supposed girlfriend played by Allison Williams, and then like seeing the whole hypnotic scene with the whole tea and stuff, and his whole escape thing is just very intense, all from his perspective. And his best friend just comes in and just helps him, I guess, throughout both the phone and at the end of the film. Obviously, originally the ending, he was supposed to be arrested and to be in jail, and his best friend would be calling him in prison. That was originally supposed to be the alternative ending. But honestly, I think I prefer the theatrical ending a lot better, because if they did the alternate ending, that almost feels like, oh, it's going to be one of those messages again. But I'm glad they didn't. Jordan Peele did not went in that direction and went with the preferred ending that we did got in the final cut. But my gripe is with it nowadays. I think it's the pacing of the movie. The pacing just doesn't go activated like Black Swan or The Substance, when we'll get into that film in the next part. Um, it just like it does really take a lot of time, but there are some moments that doesn't really explain anything, or just like doesn't really get into the horror aspect. The only two major jump scares I had in this movie were just the one scene where it just makes this jump scare sound where somebody is walking the house with Kaluuya behind Kaluuya's back, and the other being the opening when the deer runs over the car that Kaluuya and Allison Williams are driving at the beginning of the movie. That was the only one that really did scared me, and just like that is something that obviously would happen naturally when, unfortunately, a live animal like a deer would accidentally come across the street and run over without a deer crossing nearby. I had some encounters with deers when I was driving. I think only once or twice, I believe, but mainly once in one of the up in the hills in my area where I live. So that is probably the only notable one. But I did manage to stop and just wave them to keep going. So that's an interesting deer encounter. But for Get Out, it is definitely worthy for Kaluuya's performance. But in recent years, I think I don't have a fond memory as much as I used to. Now we come into what almost would have made the most sense to win Best Picture in the year of the Me Too movement, and since it was the best reviewed film of the year by critics. But obviously, it did not walk away with a single Oscar. In fact, it went home empty handed, and obviously, it got a Best Director nomination, of course, Greta Gerwig's Lady Bird. Now, this is not her directorial debut. She did co-directed with another person for a movie back in the 2000s, some sort of film in 2005, but this was her first time as a solo director. Um, so, um, basically, it's almost like Boyhood, but you take that down to 90 minutes. And it's better, but it kind of pissed me off. Although it started funny at the very beginning, like the first 20 minutes, but then it goes in a completely different direction. And I have to give this an F. Sorry, folks. Lady Bird, it just like. The only thing I can think of is I want to go with this culture. That's how it basically is with Christine's character specifically, with Saoirse Ronan's character, and it just I don't know if it's just like you can tell that Irish accent in Christine. You can still identify that. It's just like it's just I don't know. But the one thing I don't like about this movie is obviously the relationship between Christine and his mother, which his mother's played by Laurie Metcalf, of course. Obviously well known at the television side, but this was like her big movie performance ever. And she won a lot of critic awards, but I'm glad she didn't win the Oscar. I'm glad Allison Janney took the win for I, Tonya. Definitely deserving that win. Yeah, I'm glad this movie did not walk away with a single Oscar. I mean, honestly, I know it was the year of the Me Too movement, but Gerwig did not deserve that Best Director nomination. I'm sorry. I mean, the fact that this movie, it's just like the sour relationship between Christine and his mother, especially at the ending, and just like when she decides not to talk Christine throughout the rest of the summer after graduation, it's just like she wants her daughter to follow in her footsteps, but she doesn't want to. We're very against major things, and obviously with the relationship she would have with like Lucas Hedges' character and Timothy Chalamet's character, and with her family, it just like even her dad, I believe, is played by Tracy Letts, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, there's just really nothing. Ronan is kind of decent in the movie, and that's it. It just like the rest of the movie does not get funnier. It just doesn't really do much. It's just like at least I could watch it over Boyhood because at least it's shorter, but it's just like I just can't stand Christine's mother. I just can't. Now into probably a very odd film that got into Best Picture, even though it had a couple of precursors, but getting an out of nowhere Best Director nomination for Paul Thomas Anderson is saying something. Even though he was kind of mentioned almost at the beginning, like during the early stages of predictions, but then once the movie came and went a bit, it just ended up becoming a blue skyrocket to the industry, especially the Oscars, giving in Picture, Director, and 2 acting nominations. Phantom Thread from Paul Thomas Anderson, which was supposed to be Daniel Day-Lewis's final film until he's now making his return for a movie that his son is directing, called Anemone, I believe that's what it's called. I am giving this one an E as well. I don't remember much of this movie other than the costumes and maybe Vicky Krieps' performance, but it's just the costumes is the only thing I remember and maybe the score. And that's just kind of it. There's really nothing going on to the movie other than just like Vicky Krieps' character is trying to have this relationship with this Day Lewis's character, and just it's not working. And obviously Day Lewis's character's sister, which is Leslie Manville, is trying to tell Krieps' character or like what not to do to make him angry, and just like there's just like really nothing to this movie. I don't remember anything other than the music, the costumes, and maybe some shots from the film, but that's it. And now we come into Steven Spielberg's The Post, his biopic on the Pentagon Papers with Katharine Graham and Bob. I forget his last name, but obviously starring Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks, which is our first one since Selma to be a one and done nomination for Best Picture. Other than Best Picture, it received Best Actress for Meryl Streep, which is, by the way, Streep's latest and Oscar nomination to date. Yeah, that's her last nomination to date so far. She had never been nominated since then. Like, she had the possibility in 2018 with Mary Poppins Returns, or 2019 with The Laundromat, or 2020 with The Prom, but nope. And I know she had been more big on the television side with Only Murders in the Building lately, but that's in terms of the movie side. And even Don't Look Up in 2021, by the way. So I am actually gonna get this one a B. I actually really do like the whole scenario of the Pentagon Papers here. I know there is a documentary from the 2000s about the Pentagon Papers that was nominated. I believe it's called, yeah, The Most Dangerous Man in America, Daniel Ellsberg and the Pentagon Papers. I've not seen that. That probably more of the discussion when I do the documentary tier. Yeah, I really did like the whole scenario, how these two journalists have their way of investigation of the Pentagon Papers here specifically, especially from Catherine's perspective, especially being a woman at the time during the 1970s, being like one of the only major women in power in that office of all those journalists. And Streep gave a fantastic performance. I want to shout out Bob Odenkirk. He was so good in this movie. I can't believe he was completely overlooked in this movie. He was so fantastic in this. Obviously, he's big in Better Call Saul, but he also did have some movie roles during the time of Better Call Saul, including not just this film, but also in Little Women when we'll get to that in 2019. But yeah, he was so fantastic. I really wish he would have been up for a supporting actor. I don't remember Michael Stuhlbarg's moments in the movie. I think he was in 2 minutes, but I don't remember what scene it was in. It's been a while, and I really did like it. It's just been a long time since I've seen this movie that I do remember some of the scenes, so I might have to rewatch it again sometime in the future. Now into our Best Picture winner, The Shape of Water from Guillermo del Toro. A rightfully deserving winner for Best Picture and Best Director, and a masterpiece of 2017 without a doubt. It meant double S tier, excuse me, not A, double S tier easily. It is a true masterpiece. I was, like La La Land the year before, I was blown away by The Shape of Water from it, not just Del Toro's direction, but the whole story, the performances from Sally Hawkins, who gives one of the two best performances of 2017. The best one will come in our next film here. Um, Richard Jenkins is pretty good. Michael Shannon is pretty good, but Michael Stuhlbarg as the Soviet spy was very fantastic. I think he would have been the supporting, like my supporting pick for The Shape of Water, instead of Richard Jenkins. Although he was going up for supporting for Call Me by Your Name, but if it would have been one of the two, it would be The Shape of Water over Call Me by Your Name. Octavia Spencer is good in her small supporting performance in this movie, but Hawkins just playing this mute character with just doing the sign language here is just fantastic, and her unique relationship with this mute woman having this relationship with this sea creature that is played by Doug Jones, which I still am not sure. I haven't looked this up. I think it's all visual effects. It's not costume design or makeup like his character was in Pan's Labyrinth. Um, but it's just like it's so like the relationship between this mute woman and this sea creature is just so very romantic. I know it's very odd that yeah, it would be almost like with a mute woman fucking a fish, even though that actually does not happen in the movie. But you can probably say in the imagination bathtub scene, I would say is the closest thing. But it's just like yeah, it's odd that a movie like that wins Best Picture, but it's so fantastic in how Del Toro directed. Easily my favorite Del Toro movie, and it's obviously Guillermo del Toro is one of my favorite directors working today. Although I wasn't big on Nightmare Alley, but I have loved Kronos, Pan's Labyrinth, The Devil's Backbone, obviously his Pinocchio movie. I hadn't seen Crimson Peak, or I don't know if he had another movie after that, I think. But I know I'm very curious on how his Frankenstein movie is going to be when that comes out later this year. I think it will probably be like right now, if I would do my Oscar predictions right now, I would say it would be like Robert Eggers' Nosferatu at the moment, where it just gets a bunch of text. But we'll see how Del Toro's adaptation of Frankenstein will be. Obviously, it's not a remake to the Hollywood classic, unlike Eggers' Nosferatu is. So I'm very excited to see how Del Toro will tell his interpretation of the Frankenstein story, but without a doubt, The Shape of Water is his best film, and definitely the best Picture winner of the second half of the 2010s. Wrapping up 2017 is what was our original Best Picture frontrunner until Martin McDonagh got missed for Best Director and only got 2 acting wins for Frances McDormand and Sam Rockwell. 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, or Missouri, as Tiffany Haddish and Andy Serkis had butchered. Yeah, I don't like Tiffany Haddish. I'm putting this in S tier. I mean, this was like it's very interesting that it was the second to last movie I was watching, and this just topped over Dunkirk's my number one, and then I saw The Shape of Water. Okay, and it's like, okay, yep, I agree with the Academy. The Shape of Water wins, but 3 Billboards is definitely my number 2 of 2017. I mean, Marta McDonagh really captivated the story, but the performances from Frances McDormand to Sam Rockwell to Woody Harrelson, I mean, the combination of those three performances and McDonagh's direction and writing, that's just a perfect, great movie. I mean, amazing experience of just seeing how the bizarre that all three of these characters, especially McDormand and Rockwell's character, has, and just like how this woman is clarifying justice for, I believe, her daughter's death, that the police did not do any shit whatsoever, and all she did was to make have three billboards as a massive protest against the police force. And it's just like the way how it is. It's kind of more of a comedic drama, but it is definitely more so of a drama. Like there are some funny moments, but obviously when McDormand does with two high school students, but yeah, McDormand gave the best performance of 2017, rightly deserving the best actress win. Rockwell definitely deserved the best supporting actor win. Original screenplay, almost. I didn't mention about this Get Out. My personal pick would have been The Big Sick, even though that was the film's only nomination, oddly enough. But yeah, Three Billboards, definitely a fantastic movie. Although it was my number one until I saw The Shape of Water, but definitely right up there at number two behind The Shape of Water in terms of not just the picture nominees, but in terms of my favorites of 2017. We then go back to 2018, a lineup that a lot of people do not like because one way, shape, or form, one of these 8 movies does regain some backlash. And we begin this up with our first ever superhero movie to ever receive an Oscar nomination for Best Picture, Black Panther from the Marvel Cinematic Universe by Ryan Coogler. And obviously, the movie was in discussion for Best Picture, even when the movie came out because of the whole cultural impact of African cinema. But then the Academy was going to announce this stupid Best Popular Film category. It was still kind of going around a little bit in August. Then a month later, they decided they were not doing it. And that was just like, okay, we'll put Black Panther in Best Picture because of the cultural impact, obviously, and won 3 for costume design, production design, and original score. I do remember watching this movie on Netflix on my living room television a couple of years ago before I had my own side, and just seeing the whole basis of Wakanda and what the Black Panther superhero really means a lot to T'Challa. It's just that I think maybe the story is kind of a little bit kind of confused. Not really confusing, but it's just that there are two different villains. Obviously, one is Andy Serkis, and then one is obviously the main one, Michael B. Jordan. They both have a connection, I think, one way, shape, or form. But it's just like this almost like, I want to take over the land because of what happened to what T'Challa's family did to my family. And it just like, there's like, Kamunga, I believe that was the name. And yeah, Michael B. Jordan's pretty good in the movie. Chadwick Boseman's also pretty good. It just like, there are some things I'm not really a fan of. Like, one massive gripe I have, obviously, when it comes to superhero movies, is superhero movies' relationships with the police and law officials. And obviously, Julie Louis-Dreyfus's character in this is like I think an FBI or CIA agent. Very unlikable. And I just really don't like how I really don't like her character in this movie. It's just like, it's a massive gripe I have with a lot of superhero movies, like with obviously the law officials versus real superheroes. Like, this is not just obviously happens in Black Panther. This happened a couple of times in other MCU movies like Captain America Civil War and Spider-Man No Way Home, and even in other movies that we have seen, like in snippets like Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice, even though no one didn't really like that movie, and considering superheroes are massive crimes. Even this was kind of more of a massive subject when it came to The Incredibles. They really kind of bring up the discussion, especially for Incredibles 2. In terms of me putting Black Panther, I am going to give it a C. It is fine. There are a lot of couple good moments. I don't really mind the visual effects at all. I can understand why some people don't, especially the rhinos. But that's the only bad thing about that final fight. I don't mind it. And, like, from what I saw on my screen, in my television screen on Netflix, it looked fine. I don't mind Black Panther's visuals except for those rhinos. That's it. The whole setting Wakanda is nice, and the whole, like, unique, the battle structure of who would become the new leader T'Challa is pretty great with the waterfall scenes. Honestly, like, I might have preferred its sequel Wakanda Forever even more so than the first film, honestly. I don't know why, but I think it's just more memorable than the first film, to be honest. Or they're kind of both on par, but maybe Wakanda Forever is a little bit better. Now into Black Klansman from Spike Lee, which won for Best Adapted Screenplay. And yes, this I forgot to mention, 2018 is so far the latest year to have all Best Picture nominees walk away with something. I am giving this one. I have to give this. Sorry to say this. Yeah, I'm gonna have to give this an E. I'm sorry to put this on theirs because let me get my thoughts on this. Obviously, let's just get the big thing out of the way that all of us do agree on. That ending montage was not necessary. Um, yeah, like I know Spike Lee has done this with a couple of others films, like Do the Right Thing, Bamboozled, hold I believe, and even uh, Bamboozled and Malcolm X, which I think that worked well with Malcolm X's ending. But I just didn't think it didn't work well with his other films like Do the Right Thing, Bamboozled, or Black Klansman. The Five Bloods didn't even had an ending like any of his other films. I have not seen 25th Hour though. One problem I have with the movie is just that it's just like I don't know what I felt about the movie. That's kind of my massive thing. There's nothing I feel about this movie. Like, yeah, I understand what it is, and it is obviously based on Ron Stallworth's memoir. It is a biopic, but there's a lot of things I don't really like. It's just like I don't know if it's the whole undercover situation or just like yeah, it is a real story, but I just think it just didn't work well in the execution wise of the movie. Obviously, it is a drama. I get that. So it was obviously not meant to be a comedy. Maybe it just might be the performances, like by John David Washington and Adam Driver, that just doesn't really stand out. Topher Grace as David Dukes is probably the best thing about the movie. Like, although he's just only in the scenes with the phones, and obviously his scene where he actually is with the real Ron Stallworth when they're at this event, when he was the undercover cop that was assigned for this um, Ku Klux Klan or event, and it's just like very odd, but it's just like they can't do anything because the police chose the real Ron Stallworth to be the cop for the event. And like I think that actually didn't happen in real life unless if I'm mistaken. Like there are some fictional moments. I believe the whole Ron Stallworth girlfriend, I believe, supposedly is a fictional aspect from what I've remembered. But yeah. I completely forgot about the opening scene with Alec Baldwin. That is something I completely forgot, and it's just like you don't see that character again. And obviously, the ending was just very unnecessary. It would not have been my pick for adapted screenplay. My personal pick would have been Can You Ever Forgive Me, which actually won the Writers Guild. Probably the closest film to become the first non-Best Picture film to win adapted since Gods and Monsters, and the first film to non-Best Picture film to win screenplay in general since Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. A real pain almost happened to that in original this past year, but yeah. I'm not saying this because I hate the movie, it's just that I just don't have any other words to basically explain my thoughts on the movie. But now we come into one of the most controversial Best Picture nominations. Not also was mixed by critics, but directed by a homosexual pedophile, Bryan Singer's Queen biopic, or Freddie Mercury biopic, Bohemian Rhapsody. Obviously, you can't tell what scenes Bryan Singer directed and what scenes Dexter Fletcher finished, but by Directors Guild of America rules, Bryan Singer had gotten the full directing credit, since Fletcher only did, I think, like 25% of the movie or so, since I'm guessing all the scenes. From what I heard, Singer directed the Live Aid scene, I believe. Like, was one of the first scenes they filmed before Singer was fired and the whole homosexual controversy, Me Too controversy specifically. So yeah, and this movie won 4 out of 5 Oscars. I mean, the sounds, film editing, and Best Actor for Rami Malek. If it did win Best Picture, many people would have said fuck the Oscars, and there would have been a lot of massive protests from a lot of Me Too supporters, and especially for those Me Too supporters in the LGBTQ plus community, because, as I said, Bryan Singer would have homosexual sexual allegations. Um, Honestly, despite of who is behind the camera, I really did like this movie. Although I will admit, Freddie Mercury is very unlikable in this movie. I really did not like Rami Malek's performance because he just made Freddie Mercury so unlikable. Same thing with Anthony McCartan's writing. But if you take all the mean personalities of him being unlikable, I really did enjoy this movie a lot more. like a lot of the song creativity, obviously the Live Aid scene, and some of the relationships Freddie would have with the character, his girlfriend that he would have, and obviously the situation he would have with other relationships, especially with the Jim Huntington guy. I'm gonna put this in. Yeah, I'm gonna put this in B, but it would be a very high B, like a B plus. It's just that Freddie Mercury's character is just so unlikable. The editing, I don't mind. The sound mixing is fantastic. I do think it definitely deserved the win for best sound mixing. Yeah, and I really wish the entire Live Aid extent full Live Aid concert was part of the movie. It's just they only did like edited some of it, but they did do a full version of it as a bonus feature. So I really wish that was kept in the final movie. I didn't remember seeing the full version when I was watching the theatrical version, and because I don't remember as much, but since I never watched the Live Aid experience of Queen's performance, but then I did like watching back to back. I think my favorite portion of the whole um, Live Aid performance from in this movie is easily the Radio Gaga performance. Like when you watch the extended version, it's so great, and leading up to the AO part, those were probably my favorite portions of the Live Aid performance in this movie. Now into my personal Best Picture winner of 2018, and the one out of the 8 nominees that has the least controversy and the least backlash in general, Yorgos Lanthimos' The Favorite. This unique biopic about Abigail May, Queen Anne, and I forget who Rachel Weisz's character she plays in. But without a doubt, not also my personal pick of 2018, but my favorite film of that year, going in S tier. I mean, oh wow! This was actually my second Yorgos Lanthimos movie I watched. I actually watched The Lobster back in 2017 when I was doing my movie marathon in 2016, and I wasn't really a fan of the movie. I did not like The Lobster in general, but The Favorite really was a massive improvement. I think because since Yorgos Lanthimos was not in the writing stage, and you gave it to Deborah Davis and Tony McNamara, the latter of which would be the solo writer of Yorgos's next film, Poor Things. Giving both of them the writing stage and not Lantimos, and just have him direct the movie and produce the movie, I think was well worth it, because I think how Davis and McNamara took that script, um, really of the unique story of how the secrets like of the relationship between Queen Anne with each of her two girls, and that is pretty unique in a way of a sense, and how Abigail May tries to become almost like the new in command for Queen Anne instead of Rachel Weisz's character. And speaking of the performances, Emily Stone is fantastic. Olivia Colman's fantastic. Rachel Weisz is pretty good. Yeah. And but honestly, of course, obviously, many people would agree that Emily Stone and Olivia Colman are both category fraud, because the story is primarily on Abigail May and not much on Queen Anne. Like Queen Anne's kind of the center portion of the plot, but that's specifically the center portion for Abigail's story. So, yeah, Emily Stone definitely should have been up for leading, and Olivia Colman should have gone supporting. If she went supporting, if Coleman didn't win supporting, not also I think I've said this before, and some people say this, Coleman would have I would said swept supporting actress, and Glenn Close would have had an Oscar by now, since Emily Stone already had won 2 years prior for La La Land. But oddly enough, Emily Stone would still be my personal winner for Best Actress, because Abigail May was just like her performance in that was so fantastic. Would it be my performance of the year? Maybe, um, but obviously her best performance would be coming in the next decade. But yeah, she is fantastic in this. The costumes are fantastic. The production design's fantastic. It is a shame it only did took on the one Oscar for Best Actress for Olivia Colman, which was a massive upset, probably the biggest acting upset of the 2010s without a doubt. It's just that Sony Pictures Classics just didn't really campaign The Wife as a movie in general, only just for Glenn Close. Like if they did campaign The Wife for like Best Picture or Supporting Actor, but that would be more of a discussion I would say when I would do like the non Best Picture top 8 movies in another video. But yeah, okay, yeah, The Favorite would have been my pick for like costume design, production design, film editing, director for Yorgos Lanthimos, and Best Picture. I would have said both the acting categories, but since Emily Stone and Olivia Colman are in the wrong categories, I can't say them in their wrong placements. And now we come into the driving Miss Daisy of the 21st century, but the race reverse. And it was a real life biopic movie. Green Book from Peter Farrelly of the Farrelly Brothers. Yep, a racial movie directed by a white person as well. And Spike Lee was not having it. Like Crash, I am in the minority on this one, and I actually really loved this movie. A lot more so than Crash. And I am going to put this one. You know what? I'm going to put this in S. I know many people are going to disagree with me on that. But I actually really like this movie a lot. Although I've not seen Driving Miss Daisy, but obviously this is a biopic movie, and the way how Peter Farrelly decided to take this lighthearted comedy into like a real life story and just like a very feel good movie specifically. I know it's like another movie that tells you that yeah, racism is bad. I get that. But obviously, you're getting the perspective, obviously, of course, of another white person, and obviously, but it's just the connection from both perspectives of both Frank Vallelonga, also known as Tony Lip, and Don Shirley, which are both portrayed by Viggo Mortensen and Mahershala Ali. A great duo, by the way. Obviously, Ali won supporting actor again, although it is a co-lead performance. He should have been up for leading with Viggo Mortensen. That would have made a lot more sense. It obviously won Best Picture without Peter Farrelly getting in for directing, which is why it's the Driving Miss Daisy comparison. And it is also kind of a movie you can watch during the Christmas season as well, because ironically enough, because some of the last acts does take place during Christmas, like where they're in their final tour, and then obviously when they arrive back in the ending of the film. And ironically, this and Illuminations the Grinch both had their endings having this the song Chestnuts Roasting from Nat King Cole. And that is pretty funny. Both those movies from that year had that song. Both kind of Christmas movies. So yeah, Green Book is kind of a Christmas movie. So you can watch it during the holiday season, especially at the ending. Definitely a nice-hearted, good conclusion to the Oscar movie marathon. It would be my number 2 for Best Picture, honestly. Peter Farrelly definitely should have been up for Best Director, but I'm going to be honest, it did deserve the win for Best Original Screenplay. It was, I think, the screenplay of 2018. I know many people are going to disagree with me on that, but I ended up liking it a lot more than many people did, so sorry. Now we come into the movie when many people think that should have won Best Picture, what could have been almost the first streaming service movie and the first non-English film to win Best Picture, Alfonso Cuarón's Roma, which obviously I think the reason why it didn't win because Netflix did not know how to release their movies theatrically properly. And that's why they had to change, the Academy had to change a bit of the rules they would do for the following year. I am easily going to give Roma a B. I'm going to give it a B, a very low, kind of like an average B, I would say. This was, like I mentioned in the last part about the Grand Budapest Hotel, this film, Roma, and 12 Angry Men were my first films I got on Blu-ray in general, and from the Criterion Collection. And it is definitely a unique experience watching it on Netflix with my dad, and my dad kind of tagged along watching the rest of the movie with me when he got home from work. And just seeing this whole unique experience black and white is definitely fantastic. One take is pretty fine in some scenes. Some of them really work well, especially in the beach scene alone. Like the beach rescue, which is probably the most famous scene in the movie that is seen the promotional material for the posters. Yeah, that is a fantastic scene, but it's just like the whole journey with Yalitza Aparicio's character, obviously having her, just even though she's just a maid, but with her relationship with the mother of the family and with her children, and obviously dealing with the situation with her being pregnant by a man that doesn't even care about it. But she has all the support from not just the mother of her family, but also her co-worker and also the children of the family. And just like, they almost feel like she's like a second mother to them, even though there's no LGBTQ plus theme aspect on it. But this is kind of more loosely based on Alfonso Cuarón's life a bit, and that's kind of what it is. The story is kind of pretty good, but Yalitza Aparicio's performance is so fantastic. Definitely a great starring breakthrough role for her to get that Oscar nomination. She would have been my personal pick for Best Actress, unless if Emily Stone was put in the right category for The Favorite with Olivia Colman going supporting, then Aparicio would have been probably number 2, I would say. But in terms of how the Oscars are, with Coleman being in the wrong category, Aparicio definitely would have been my personal pick. I wouldn't have not given it to cinematography or best foreign language film the last year that category would be called foreign language film until it would be renamed to best international feature. My personal pick would have been Florian Henkel von Dornersmarck's Never Look Away, one of the most beautiful movies I have seen. And this would actually be the first Netflix movie to be released on the Criterion Collection, and obviously, I believe the first streaming service movie in general to do so, and it is definitely worth it. And now, Bradley Cooper's debut feature, his remake on A Star Is Born. Now, I actually did watch the original 1938 or 7, I think it's 7, adaptation of 7, I believe, of the original Star Is Born movie, as well as the first two remakes, the one in the 50s with Judy Garland and the one in the 70s from Barbara Streisand. Obviously, the original film is the best out of the four of this story. Um, but I would say Bradley Cooper's remake is the best out of the three remakes that has been made. And it's interesting that the first two, like the original and the first remake, were centered on movies, and then the second remake and the third remake involves around music. I would say probably maybe the next two Stars Born remakes would probably either center around television or in the theater stage. Probably in the theater stage. Like yeah, that's the thing. You just need two more remakes. One Hanks centering on the theatrical stage, and then two more remakes centering on the television stage, and then boom, you got all four main EGOT entertainment values. Unless if you do count the realms of literature, but or radio or something like that. But radio kind of technically means recording as well. But yeah, I do think Cooper's remake is the best out of the remakes. I don't know. I don't know why I did there. I did a remake of saying that so much. Tongue-tied there. I am gonna give A Star Is Born. Back then, I would have said B, but now I'm kind of leaning more towards a C. It's just I think because there are some scenes I don't think has not aged well for me. Especially the manager's final scene with Jackson. That manager's such a dick. But I would say there are some good moments. But Bradley Cooper gives the fantastic performance as the male main character. Obviously, under the name Jackson Maine here. Obviously, the original was named Norman Maine. But out of all the male protagonists in the Star Is Born story, I think Cooper had the best interpretation of the male protagonist. Obviously, the original one, I think, had the best female interpretation. I forgot the actress's name, unfortunately. But yeah, I do think it is the better of the remake. Shallow, fantastic song, definitely deserved the win for best original song. Obviously, back then, I would have said Cooper would have been my pick for best actor, but I'm leaning towards to somebody else now in recent years, and that will be in our next film that we're going into. So yeah, it is a good remake, but it's probably something I would not get physically as I wanted to nowadays. It's just like there are some moments I would not go back to, but there are some very heartwarming moments between Ali and Jackson. Our final one for 2018 is Hot Damn Vice from Adam McKay, his biopic on one of the vice presidents of the United States, Dick Cheney. This was a way much better movie than The Big Short for me, and I am gonna give this one an A. I know many critics are very mixed in this, but I'm in the minority. I actually really did like this movie a lot more so. Although there are some things I don't like as much, like the like Sam Rockwell's George W. Bush seems odd, but like a lot of the scenes of how Richard has to deal with the relationship with his wife and his family and how he understands all three of their political differences, especially in one of his daughters, since one of his daughters in real life is a lesbian. And it just seeing like the situation of how he deals not just as a father and also as a husband, and but also specifically even as one of the most iconic politicians during his time, not just in office but also throughout the vice presidency. And that's mainly credit not just to Adam McKay's writing, but also the fantastic performance by Christian Bale as Richard Channing, and the makeup is just so fantastic on him. I don't know if he gained weight to do the role. I know he has done sometimes in a lot of his movies or lost some weight. I don't know how he does it. Because I know in Darkest Hour, Gary Oldman had a fat suit on him. I don't know if Christian Bale did on Vice or not. I'm not really sure. But yeah, the makeup is so fantastic on this. I can't really say it would have been my personal pick because I've yet to see the Swedish film Border or Mary Queen of Scots that starred Saoirse Ronan and Margot Robbie, so I can't really say about that. Um, It definitely would have been in my personal lineup. Honestly, Amy Adams would have been my personal pick for Best Supporting Actress. So yeah, because with Emily Stone in supporting and Olivia Colman in leading, if Colman went supporting, I would have gone with Colman. But since she went leading, Adams would have been my pick. So this was probably the closest thing for Adams to get an Oscar, and this is her latest Oscar nomination to date. She would have been almost in consideration last year for Night Bitch, but since critics were mixed on it, unfortunately that did not happen. But yeah, Christian Bale, if I would have given an Oscar to Bale out of his 3 acting nominations, it definitely would have been for Vice and not for The Fighter. And especially his final scene where Richard is doing this interview and then he breaks the fourth wall and speaks to the audience, specifically why they voted for him. Like, they did not vote for George W. Bush to become the vice president of the United States. And that is a very fantastic ending right there. And then there's also a very funny post-credit scene, like at a rehabilitation during just this massive argument that had me out in stitches, and that I was laughing my ass off on that. That was a very funny ending. Compared to the ending in Don't Look Up, though, yeah, Vice had the better post-credit ending. That was pretty funny. We finally wrap up the 2010s with 2019, and we return back with 9. And we begin this up with Ford versus Ferrari, or as known for people in the UK and some portions in Europe, Le Mans 66. James Mangold's biopic here, racing one to be precise. I will say this right now. If you have seen at least the first Cars, or the Cars movies in general, you are pretty much going to kind of understand a little bit more about this movie, more so than average people that are not familiar with racing or NASCAR and stuff like that. But if you kind of have a little bit of knowledge about racing movies or like other films like Rush, you're going to really love this movie. And without a doubt, Ford versus Ferrari is going at S tier. I mean, what a way to start up. And this was actually my first out of the 9 Best Picture nominees I had to watch in a specific order, because this was guaranteed the least likely to win. It did took away 2 for sound editing and film editing, but I am very happy it got this Best Picture nomination. I really wish there would have been up for a lot more nominations, like for cinematography, original screenplay, actor for Christian Bale, and especially James Mangold for Best Director. I mean, so he gets nominated for Director for a Complete Unknown, but not for Ford versus Ferrari. I mean, he was overlooked for Best Director this season. Out of all the 9 Best Picture nominees, Mangold was the only one out of all the 9 directors that had no directing nominations this season. He would have been a fantastic all-timer director nomination. That would have been heavily inspired to finally give him his first directing nomination. But this was his first Best Picture nominee of his career, so that is something, because Walk the Line definitely would have made it back in 2005. So Ford versus Ferrari just done it. So yeah, I really love the whole connection of how the whole massive build-up is, even before the events of Le Mans 66, with the relationship between both Christian Bale and Matt Damon's character. It's Carol Shelby. It's Matt Damon's character, and Ken Miles. Yeah, between Ken Miles and Carol, their relationship they have working together. To trying to make sure that Fords really are the big thing to compete against with the Ferraris in Le Mans. And they managed that successfully. And all of Ken Miles just really, all of his moments with his son are also very fantastic. Even the one scene where his wife just drives crazy and tries to have her husband tell her what's going on. And just like, that's so insane what she did. And that's played by Katrina Balfe, by the way. I didn't even realize that until like years later. But yeah. But yeah, the whole Le Mans event, really fantastic. Watching that entire experience alone, of almost seeing the event almost in color for the first time instead of black and white if you were watching it on television, but like getting a close and personal experience with Le Mans 66. So yeah, definitely a fantastic Best Picture nominee. And James Mangold gave the Best Direction of 2019, and he would have been my personal winner for Best Director if he was nominated. Now we come into our biggest loser of 2019, our second installment of the Martin Scorsese's 10 nominees losing trilogy with The Irishman. Not also that it got 10 nominations and 0 losses, Netflix had the rights to the film, but also received a lot of backlash in 2019 from a lot of toxic Marvel fans that think Avengers Endgame is the greatest movie of all time. But it's not. It's Back to the Future fan service. Um, the Irishman, I ended up really didn't enjoying this movie despite of the 3 hour length. I think it was really paced well. I am giving this one I'm gonna give this a B, but it would be a very high B, like a B plus that is almost close to an A minus. I can still see why mobster movies can still be made in today's standards, and telling the story about Frank Sheeran, along with his connections with Jimmy Hoffa, is just fantastic with the connection between Robert De Niro and Al Pacino. And Al Pacino, oh my gosh, he would have been my personal winner for Best Supporting Actor. I mean, his scenes, like Hoffa's scenes, are just so fantastic. Although I keep forgetting he's very unrecognizable. By the way, I know majority of that has courtesy of some of the visual effects for the de aging ones, but there are some hairstyling to it to make him very unrecognizable. And this was Pacino's first role in a Scorsese movie, by all means. And obviously Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci, the latter of which coming out of retirement to do this movie again, working with Scorsese, got him his last Oscar nomination. I'm surprised De Niro got overlooked for Best Actor, though, although he was up for Best Picture for producing the film, but it was his best performance until I saw Killers of the Flower Moon, to be precise. Nice. And he definitely should have been a good candidate for Best Actor. I'm surprised he was very overlooked, except for Critics' Choice, by all means. Steven Zalian did a fantastic job writing the script. Thelma Schoonmaker really did a fantastic job in the editing. I mean, The Irishman would have been also my pick for Best Film Editing. I mean, even though Schoonmaker is like the legend, and despite the 3 hour length, it's just like it doesn't feel like a 3 hour movie. It just feels like you're watching a real life documentary, like a never before seen one, and just really telling the whole story. And obviously, that Frank has the relationship with. Obviously, the only major relationship he had in his family was with one of his daughters who doesn't speak much. I know there was a lot of backlash a lot of people had on Anna Paquin's performance because she doesn't do much or just basically does a silent treatment. But it is kind of accurate to the story because after when Hoffa had died, because he's still unaware who killed him, when obviously in the movie it showed that Frank was the one that killed him, but it's still very unsure to this day on how he was killed. Obviously, Frank's daughter decided to stop talking to her dad for the rest of his life because she was so mad at what she probably knew what he has done. And it is accurate to the story. Even Robert De Niro defended Anna Paquin's performance in that, which is very understandable to the accurate portrayal. And it's ironic that Pacino and Pesci only have one scene together at a party, and that's it. Pesci is just fine. It's just that there's nothing really much to him. It's just that Pacino kind of really takes the standpoint of the movie. So it does show that there is still possibility of doing some sort of mobster movies in today's standards like that film. Now into my best picture pick of 2019 and my number one of that year as well. Taika Waititi's he's Jojo Rabbit. Now, obviously, nowadays, it's not really a thing to poke fun at Nazis nowadays, especially after Schindler's List, kind of like how Steven Spielberg felt like. But obviously, you had Inglourious Bastards, where kind of sabotage them. Jojo Rabbit does kind of return the satirizing of them, focusing on a Hitler Youth guy who has actually Hitler as his imaginary friend and dealing with an actual Jewish girl living in his house that his mother took in. And I am giving this one obviously an S since it is my favorite of 2019. I really love the whole unique story of like one of the best stories, one of the best movies that focuses on a child that is the main character. And Roman Griffin Davis as JoJo really made the character so iconic. Like JoJo is definitely one of the best main characters of the year. He just really has something into him from going into this like, oh, I support Hitler, and then after when this Jewish girl comes in who was actually close friends to JoJo's late sister, he now really fell hard to this girl, which is of course played by Thomas and Mackenzie. And obviously, some weird moments he has relationship with his mother and trying to figure out, especially without JoJo's dad, who was in the army, of course, and his mother obviously doesn't really care and actually is opposed to the Nazis. I just think the casting choice for Scarlett Johansson is very odd to me. I think they should have gone with someone who has a more of a European taste or British taste. I mean, Thomas Mackenzie's New Zealand, so or even Australian, like something that more of a European casting choice instead of having an American actor casting in that. Taika Waititi as Hitler, very interesting casting choice. Having the director also be in this movie, definitely a good choice. Although obviously it does kind of shy away from some of the other supporting performances like Sam Rockwell, um, obviously Scarlett Johansson, and especially Thomasin McKenzie, who would have been my personal winner for supporting actress and would have been my personal choice in the supporting cast for Jojo Rabbit and not Scarlett Johansson, honestly. And just the relationship between Jojo and Thomasin McKenzie's character is just very unique with all the scenes they have, and just like it's just like one of Jojo's earlier crushes that he gets because one of the scenes there's butterflies in his stomach, and when it's just like it's so cute for a little child to be for a childhood crush, and that is pretty cute, I would say. I really wish what would have happened after when they danced. I remembered I saw a comment when the ending had its own clip on YouTube. I believe it said, hopefully they're not located in East Germany because obviously the Cold War would have happened. So although this is based on a novel, from Caging Skies, it would be very interesting to see. I would love to see a follow up to see if Jojo and Mackenzie's character would, if they end up being in West or East Germany. If they are, how would they deal with the Cold War and stuff like that? And now how both of them would become now adopted siblings to somebody else, and that would be pretty unique. But obviously, that would have to been if there was an actual follow up to the novel or not. But I wouldn't mind actually see almost like I would love to see almost a sequel to Jojo Rabbit, but exploring into the Cold War aspect with Jojo and Mackenzie's character. And Jojo Rabbit did win Best Adapted Screenplay, which gave Taika Waititi an Oscar, but I would have given to somebody else, but we'll get to that pretty soon. And here it is, our first DC movie to be nominated for Best Picture, as Black Panther became the first Marvel movie, and it was our most nominated film with 11 nominations, gained $1 billion at the box office, mixed reviews by critics, and won 2 for original score and Best Actor for Joaquin Phoenix, Joker. Uh, I've had a bit of more of a changement in recent years. I am putting this now in C. Yeah, I'm gonna put it in C. I'm gonna put it in, but it would be a C plus. Um, I think the thing about it with Joker is that I think it just the mental health scenario just kind of is the thing that kind of takes a bit forever before we get more into the whole evolution of the Joker aspect. Yeah, it does take a while, but there's weird relationships that Arthur would have, whether it be one of his neighbors in his apartment or one of the employees he worked at, or specifically with his mother. It's just very odd how the scenario goes. And then, obviously, it just, the whole message doesn't obviously really come occur. I know there was a lot of controversy, of course, when the movie was about to come out, of course, and especially for its theater scare. But I will be honest, the last 30 minutes are awesome. The last 30 minutes are pretty much awesome that honestly, I would have given the best director win to Todd Phillips. Despite of some issues it does have, I think Todd Phillips should have won best director. I think, and I would also say Joker would have been also my personal pick probably for best sound editing, I would say. That or Ford versus Ferrari. I think Ferrari makes. Well, then again, I've not seen Ad Astra, so I can't say in sound mixing. But between that and Ford versus Ferrari for sound editing is something. But Todd Phillips would have been my pick for best director, oddly enough. Now, I actually had saw Joker Following Al Duel, and it's very interesting. I would say if you take the 30 minutes in the first film and take out the last 30 minutes in Following El Duel, once Joker returns back to the prison and what Brendan Gleeson does with the Joker character, if you take that portion out and put in the last 30 minutes of Joker, I think I would have loved Joker, the entire Joker movie, with Joker's relationship with Lady Gaga and going the same scenario he did in the first film. But yeah, Yeah, I didn't really even like the way how Joker Folie à Deux went. That really went downhill for its last 30 minutes. So, yeah, I might just prefer watching the original film, but there are some great moments in Folie à Deux, I'll be honest. But I think Folie à Deux would have been a D for me, honestly. Next up is Little Women, and this was the notable movie, our fourth theatrical film adaptation of the Louis May Alcott novel. And obviously, this one, of course, is directed by Greta Gerwig. Her follow up to Lady Bird, and obviously, this movie was infamous for Gerwig not getting in for Best Director, which caused the hashtag #OscarSoMale movement, which obviously is Issa Rae, who announced the nomination with John Cho, said congratulations to those men. Obviously, yep, it was obviously confidence. But unlike Lady Bird, I loved this adaptation of Little Women, and probably my favorite thing from Greta Gerwig, because I was not a massive Gerwig. I'm kind of hit or miss with Gerwig, because I thought she was fine in 20th Century Woman. I don't understand what the hell she was doing in Frances Ha. I obviously hated Lady Bird, and we'll get to my thoughts on Barbie in the next part. But this is probably the best thing that has come out of Greta Gerwig for Little Women, and I'm going to put this in S. It is my number two of 2019 and number two of the picture nominees behind Jojo Rabbit. And yes, I would put Gerwig in for Best Director here. The way how she told this Louis May Alcott novel is very fantastic. I was not really familiar with the story, and this was a great introduction to it. And the way how the structure goes from two different time periods, from the past to the present, and even another period where Joe, specifically Ronan's character, as they call her for short, is just submitting her entire story to Tracy Letts' character to actually make Little Women an actual book. And just the whole discussion is like, there are some things missing. And it's just like, that's pretty clever, and the way how they did that. I don't know if that's not even in the other adaptations, of course, but I think that's something that I think Gerwig did in her adaptation. It did win for Best Costume Design. It was fantastic. Once again, like Brooklyn, Ronan would have been my personal pick for Best Actress here. So yeah, Ronan would have won 3 out of 4 Oscars for me personally if I would have given her my vote. So yeah, that is so odd. Atonement, Brooklyn, and Little Women. It's just Lady Bird. She would just be at fifth place, honestly. So yeah, she would not even make it in my personal lineup for Lady Bird. But yeah, this is a massive improvement. The ensemble is fantastic from Florence Pugh, who would have been my personal pick for Best Supporting Actress. Emma Watson's great. I'm surprised she was overlooked. Laura Dern is great in this. I prefer her this than our next movie that we're going to be talking about. Chris Cooper, Bob Odenkirk, Timothy Chalamet is great. It's a very lighthearted movie with all the lighthearted moments going in. I even especially love the there was one joke where the guy who was working, I believe was Chalamet's teacher, said, and there's also a lovely greenhouse, and all the characters were just looking at it, and I was laughing. That was so funny. I really loved the score for this movie. The costumes, the production design, everything about it. The editing was fantastically paced well. Yeah, not also, and this would have also been my personal winner for adapted screenplay. Gerwig gave the best script of 2019. It definitely would have been my pick for adapted screenplay, best supporting actress, best actress. Gerwig definitely would have been in for best director, and it would be my number two for best picture behind Jojo Rabbit. Now we're into Marriage Story from Noah Baumbach, aka Greta Gerwig's boyfriend. And I think maybe why Gerwig did not make it in Best Director, because maybe her and Baumbach have split votes since they were both dating. And this is another Netflix movie, and I'm going to put this in B, but it would just be a standalone B. It is definitely, obviously, a unique, obviously, divorce story. Obviously, this is not the first time we had a movie centering around divorce. Kramer versus Kramer is the most popular one. But this one does kind of focus on both of the divorced parents' perspectives, where you have one with Scarlett Johansson and one with Adam Driver, and also the whole build-up of the whole divorce courts with their lawyers. It is, there are some good moments, but there are some fine moments. Adam Driver is fantastic in this movie, and he would have been my personal pick for Best Actor, honestly. I'm kind of ashamed that he did not win a single award this season. That is kind of a shame he didn't. especially he had other movies that year, like The Report he was in, and obviously Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, of course. Even though many people did not like that movie, and just came off of a year after Black Klansman. And then after that, his career kind of went downhill a bit. And like after Megalopolis, he fired his agent. So hopefully he does get something better nowadays. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, Driver, his performance was fantastic. Obviously, the argument scene is fantastic, and him with singing at the bar or cafe or something like that with his fellow um, cast members of his stage play is just fantastic. Johansson is pretty good, but there's not a lot of fantastic moments, I would say. And then, as for Laura Dern's performance, I'm going to be honest, I would also say that's kind of undeserving. And I would say this right now, her character in Marriage Story would be if she was not an actress. She would be a feminist lawyer. I do have this movie on the Criterion Collection, and it is a pretty nice addition, especially when you get both of the notes from both Charlie's parents. So that is a pretty nice featurette, I would say. And then these next three, they're not going to be on any of the top three tier lists, I would say. Starting up with 1917, Sam Mendes' World War One one take movie. And I'm going to put this in D. I'm going to put this in D because it doesn't really, like, obviously, like I kind of mentioned with Revenant and Birdman, I'm not really big, and even with Roma, I'm not really big on the one-take movies. It worked well with Gravity, but I think it didn't work well with this film either. I was thinking I was kind of getting tired of these one-take films. Um, it just, like, the whole journey is pretty unique. And the performances from George McKay, especially Dean Charles Champ, who is his co-partner throughout this entire movie. The whole journey they had to get through, and then the whole experience when George McKay is now on his own. It's just like it is pretty unique, but it's just like I think the one take aspect just doesn't really need it to be there. It did one for sound mixing and cinematography and visual effects. That's not really a great combo, I would say, for me personally. I wouldn't even not even put it up for. Why was it up for original screenplay though? That was odd. I mean, just 10 nominations was not worth it. Maybe same thing with The Irishman, and as well as another Joker did not need to get 11 either. And I just realized I put 3 of the films in their wrong respective tiers. So let me fix that here real quick. And there it was right there, and then right there, and then right there. There we go. So here's the movie that received 10 nominations. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood from Quentin Tarantino. Uh, I'm going to put this also in D, but that's mainly because, although there are some very entertaining scenes, but the main plot specifically, if you just add that, it's just nothing but filler. There's like so much filler in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood because it really doesn't go much into the Manson murders until like at least when Cliff Booth goes to the ranch and then the climax. That's it. There are some fantastic filler scenes in this movie I do like Rick Dalton's shooting scene in the Western with the kid, child actress played by Julia Butters, who is fantastic in this movie. Um, and then obviously the whole scenario with Cliff and one of the fictional Manson hitchhikers, played by Margaret Qualley, their whole connection of going running into each other, and then they finally have a moment, even though Cliff just doesn't really care about much about her, but she really does. But Cliff just really wants to go back to the ranch where he knows and see an old friend of his. But the Mansons are not really liking his company. Obviously, this movie was responsible on why Sean Baker casted Mikey Madison in Anora. Obviously, Madison was the one that played the Manson that got torched by Rick Dalton in the ending of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So that is pretty awesome. And I really did like the ending on how, kind of like how it's obviously it's a fictional story of how it did do justice for and much respect for Sharon Tate and all of her other 3 friends that were tragically murdered. And since this movie was given a blessing, I believe, by Sharon Tate's sister, the fact that this movie kind of existed. But since there is so much filler for most of this movie, it kind of doesn't really work well for me. And our final Best Picture nominee of the 20th tenths is our first non-English film to win Best Picture, the South Korean movie Parasite. I did do a review on this movie, but it wasn't really much of a review because I had to avoid spoilers. But because this was like the picture movie of the year that you could not spoil. You could not even spoil this movie during its awards run and when the movie came out. So I think it's okay. It's fine. I am going to put this in C. But the thing about it is, the reason I'm putting this in C is that if you know where the movie is going, you kind of know where how the rest of the movie is going to go because you kind of know that this family, the Kim family, was going to get caught regardless. Although it was the housemaid, but with the whole secret and everything like that, it just didn't really work for me. Although the climax of the birthday party was very intense, but there were some moments that were really unnecessary. Like, yeah, they were going to get caught regardless of how they managed to get into this rich family's house by faking themselves as what jobs they actually do have. Um, but can I just say, the house itself, minus the basement, I would love to own a house like that, especially having a television in your bathroom while taking a bath. It's just fantastic. Yeah, so although I'm not really big on Parasite, and I would not have given it the 4 wins it got, I would have given original screenplay to Marriage Story, but not by much, since that was a weak lineup. Best director, of course, to Joker, Best Picture to Jojo Rabbit, and Best International Feature, since now it's the category we now know as in now today, to the North Macedonian documentary Honeyland. But I would give Parasite the win for Best Production Design, though, over Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, just because of the house alone. There are some good performances, of course, but since if you kind of know where the movie is going, where you know that the poor family was going to get caught regardless, although the twist was very interesting, yeah, you're not going to be a fan of this movie, and you think it's just going to be okay. Although it's a very historic moment, and that's amazing for a non-English film to win Best Picture, hopefully an animated film would do so in the years to come.